Hi guys, Mr. New Mobile here. Apple iPad Pro with latest M1 chip. Please subscribe, followed by the bell. You can also keep up on Facebook, Twitter by clicking the links in the description. Apple's latest iPad Pro gets upgraded with the game-changing M1 processor and a new screen that rivals the very best TVs, let alone tablets and laptops. The 5th generation iPad Pro comes in 2 versions, one costing £749 with an 11-inch screen and the top dog with a 12.9-inch screen costing £999. Both have the new M1 chip, but only the larger model. The new screen technology is an evolution of the traditional LCD display called Mini LED, which has hitherto been the preserve of high-end televisions. An array of 2,596 individual LEDs behind the LCD display only light up behind bright parts of the image, producing super bright lights and deep, inky blacks in dark areas. It has a new kind of display so good I think it is the best thing for watching movies that isn't a high-end television. It starts at $1,099 for a 128GB version, but increased storage and accessories like a keyboard or the Apple Pencil can shoot the price up fairly quickly. Both the 12.9 and the smaller 11-inch iPad Pro, which starts at $799, feature Apple's M1 processor and some other updated specs, all of which are excellent. But even that fancy processor, but the 12.9-inch version of the iPad Pro is an iPad with a very beautiful display. And so again, the question is what that screen means to the experience of using an iPad, especially since the price has jumped $100 compared to the last model. How much do you care about having a great screen? The Apple iPad Pro 12.9-inch M1, good stuff, is that it has an amazing mini LED screen, fast M1 processor, center stage camera that follows faces in video calls. Bad stuff is no multi-user support, camera still misplaced, iPadOS still limited. An Apple iPad Pro 11-inch M1, good stuff, it has a fast M1 processor, center stage camera follows faces in video calls, more portable than the bigger iPad. Bad stuff, no multi-user support, camera still misplaced, iPadOS still limited. There are 2 basic types you usually see, LCD and OLED. Both have pixels that combine red, green, and blue subpixels to create colors, but in order for you to actually see those colors, the display pixels need to be lit up. OLED pixels are self-lit. LCD panels light up the display pixels by putting one, several, or many LED backlights behind them. The benefit of LCD panels with LED backlighting is that they're relatively inexpensive, long-lasting, bright, and unlikely to burn in. The benefit of OLED is that the black pixels are not lit at all, meaning you get superb contrast, but they are relatively expensive and don't get as bright. Each technology's strength is the other's weakness. Mini LED, the technology powering the 12.9-inch iPad Pro display, is designed to bring the LCD panel as close as possible to OLED's contrast and black levels. Its display pixels are not self-lit but instead lit from behind. The trick is that they're lit by 10,000 tiny LED lights split up by software into 2,500 local dimming zones. It's almost like the backlight itself is a lower resolution screen behind the screen, tracking the image and making sure the black parts of the picture aren't lit up. I would never call the display on the 11-inch iPad Pro bad because it's a stellar display. Apple is calling this screen the Liquid Retina XDR display. And it has all the benefits of Apple's previous iPad Pro displays. It's very high resolution, color accurate, and it has fairly good viewing angles. It supports ProMotion, Apple's term for a variable refresh rate to increase smoothness and match the frame rate of videos. Sure, there's great contrast when you're browsing the web, texting, playing games, and so on, but really it's not very different from any other iPad. Apple still limits the max brightness in most scenarios to 600 nits, which is bright enough, but not eye-popping. The iPad and iPad Air max out at 500 nits. The magic kicks in when you are viewing videos or photos in full screen. When you do that, the iPad Pro kicks into a different HDR mode. The overall max brightness of the screen jumps up to a powerful 1000 nits, and peak brightness for certain lighting can hit 1600 nits. If you are also not a display quality enthusiast, you might be left unimpressed with descriptions of nits and contrast ratios. I get it, But there are intangibles to the screen that I struggle to describe and have struggled even harder to capture in photos and video. For example, some colors just look better and more accurate to me, especially textured yellows. It just does a better job showing fine detail in situations where dark and light elements get mixed together, like with hair or a building reflecting sunlight. The display isn't perfect, of course. If you run a local dimming test you will see blooming on brightly lit pixels against a black background. I only notice this when running tests that are specifically designed to surface blooming. In regular use, everything looked great, sharp, and evenly lit across the entire screen. It does not mean that iPads will be able to run Mac apps now. While Apple is happy to let the Mac run iPad apps and generally let you do whatever you want on it, except touch the screen, the iPad Pro continues to be a more, shall we say, curated experience. The M1 is obviously fast, and in benchmarks, it's faster than the last A12Z Bionic that Apple put in the previous iPad Pro models. But in my usage, I didn't actually perceive any speed improvements in any of the apps that I used because everything was already very fast on the iPad Pro. I got the exact same export speeds in Premiere Rush on the brand new 12.9-inch iPad Pro with the M1 as on my 2018 iPad Pro. Both the RAM and the M1 processor are specs that won't make an appreciable difference to the vast majority of iPad users. They're specs that will matter to certain Pro users who have found specific apps and workflows that push the limit of what an iPad can do. Another consequence of the M1 is that the USB-C port now supports Thunderbolt accessories. In theory, that's great. I plugged my iPad into my very fancy CalDigit TS3 Plus Thunderbolt dock and was gratified to see my monitor light up right away. A USB microphone interface hooked into the dock, and for whatever reason, I was unable to get any audio out of it on the iPad. Seemingly every new iPad Pro inspires an admittedly exhausting, but also necessary discussion about whether or not iPadOS is actually capable enough to justify the price of the hardware that runs it. The M1 processor sharpens that discussion. To me, the biggest difference between the Mac and the iPad at this point isn't the touchscreen, it's Apple's approach to the operating system. On the iPad, Apple would rather not offer a feature than have it work in a non-iPad way. That's noble, but it means the company has committed itself to reinvent a lot of wheels in computing files, peripheral support, multi-window interfaces, and all the rest have to be rethought and redone. One more note, Apple has said that the original 12.9-inch Magic Keyboard may not precisely fit when closed, as the new iPad Pro is slightly thicker. But when I tested it, I couldn't discern any difference between the fit on the original and the new, white Magic Keyboard. Both worked and closed fine. In any case, set aside the "what's a computer" argument, and let's be more pragmatic. A 256GB 12.9-inch iPad Pro with a Magic Keyboard costs $1,548. A 256GB MacBook Air with the same processor costs $999. And just to be realistic, most people can get more done on the Mac than on the iPad. Taken strictly as a work machine, the Mac wins out on both price and functionality. That includes battery life, by the way. Both iPad Pros have good battery life, but it's not significantly improved over previous iPads. And as many people have discovered during the pandemic, if you actually use the iPad for work all day, especially if you do a lot of Zoom calls, the iPad Pro can conk out in 8 hours or less. The MacBook Air edges it out. The reason to get the iPad Pro 12.9 or even the 11 is simply to get the best, nicest iPad. Unless you can specifically answer right now which app in your workflow is slowed down by the specs on a lesser iPad, the $599 iPad Air, or even the $329 base iPad offer the same core features that most people really use. That is it guys. If you are new here, please subscribe, like the video, comment. Thanks for watching. See you on my next video. Peace out.